I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
First off, I would like to thank my good friend Wes Tillman. I met him on Way of the World's Nat Connect operation. He lives in the town over from me. He made that introduction for me. I like it quite a bit. So I owe you lunch, Wes. We'll have to get together here soon when I get done with all this work. I'd also like to thank the people you see on the screen now. If you participate in that leftist cesspool called Twitter, these are some bad goys to follow, and I would recommend following them. They helped me get together some of the videos that I was going to use for this video, and I really appreciate you all. I'd also like to thank Poseidon, because I'm using part of his video in this one as well. So, let's get to it. Don't believe your lying eyes. This is something that we are seeing more and more nowadays, especially with all the election bullshit that's going on here in the United States. Don't believe your lying eyes. That is what authoritative sources tell us. Don't believe them. What you see, don't believe it. What you hear, don't pay heed to it. Yeah. But that's not so much the topic of today's video, although it has a role in it. Let's see. Today I'm going to be talking about what I see as a real tragedy. A very real tragedy. I have often talked with various people that I speak to online. I think of my friend Noah, or Warwolf as his name is on Twitter. I think of him. We speak to each other fairly often. We have talked, and there are several other people that I have talked to about this and seen them conversing amongst themselves about it. There are many of us who would like to return to Europe, to the land of our ancestors. And you know, I think this is it's a good idea, you know. It's only natural to want to return. But for me myself, I have thought about it. And to be honest, I don't see myself ever going to Europe, or at least going there to live. I would certainly love to visit Europe. I would love to visit England, Northern England. I'd love to visit Denmark, because these are the places where my ancestors are from. They came over here to America generations ago. I would also like to visit Norway and Sweden. And when I say this, I mean, I don't want to visit London or Copenhagen or Oslo or Stockholm. Fuck those places. I want to see the rural places. I want to see the country. Not some city, to be honest. But me myself, I don't see myself leaving East Tennessee. But who knows? Now, The real tragedy, though, that I'm getting at is the relentless floods of immigrants, migrants, of refugees. The endless floods that have been flooding into Europe. Now, I don't mean to make light of the situation here in the United States, but I will say this: we were kind of fucked, for lack of a better word, from the get-go. After all, when the first Europeans settled here, this place instantly became multiracial. But in Europe, what we have is a true tragedy. It's ridiculous. It's frightening. It's alarming. And here's another video, I'm sure some of you have seen it, of Erwin Cohen, however you pronounce it. Here's a video of him telling us of his plans. These people, they have plans for you. And they're not good plans.
The Norwegian society is an ethnic homogeneous society with a huge majority population, and the Norwegian society has a very short history with ethnic minorities at a scale. So there is a job to be done. We have good funding. The authorities see a strong civil society as a benefit to the society in general, and it's not always easy to get the funds we need, but if you look at it with foreign eyes, you would say that we're being funded nicely.
We don't get funding depending on supporting the government, for example. We get funding although we criticize, which is what we do a lot of the time, because I do see that as an important factor, that we do stand up and we answer hearings, we disagree with law amendments, for example. And that's an important part of our work that creates a strong civil society and involves the general population into the government system in a way.
The Norwegian people has not too much knowledge on Islam. They don't know too much about Judaism. They don't know too much about the Roma people. So I think knowledge is an utfordring, a challenge. Mm-hmm. And so we do have rising anti-Semitism, and we have rising anti-Tsiganism, and we have Islamophobia, and we have racism. So we have a lot to do. So we still have need of NGOs like Center Against Racism.
I think what you see in Norway is that you see less structural racism, less obvious racism. You find less clear racists on the streets, for example. You don't find anyone very few going around shouting racist slogans. But it's there and it's more invisible, but it's more within that culture and within the society. It's more what they write on the internet, for example, and it's more within the prejudices that we have that you don't necessarily see. No one would say, I hate that group of people, or very few would, with a few examples. But they will use examples why Islam is a big problem for our society, how the Roma is poor and eat rats, for example. So there's all these things that slightly like drips that happens constantly, which means that for a minority living in Norway, they will experience racism on some levels. And they will feel it, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. And I think that's part of the big problem here that we constantly fight against, but it makes it harder to deal with, because you can't say, oh, he's the racist or that is the racist phrase, but it's a combination of so many things that create the racism that we find here and the discrimination that people experience.
No one in Norway wants to have anti-Semite as a label on itself. nor racists or raised to being a racist. If you accuse anyone of being a racist, it's like the worst you can say to anyone in Norway.
Now, this is just another example of an influential member of a tribe, that certain tribe, letting us know of their plans. You know, I feel like I've made lots of videos since I've been doing this, and I feel like sometimes I just repeat myself and I harp and bitch about the same things, but this is very important. It's a tragedy. There's something wrong with Norway because they have little experience with Islam or Judaism. Fucking bald motherfucker. But we all know this. We know where they stand on this. You know, the Great Replacement, authoritative sources, Wikipedia, the media, they tell us that this theory is false. It's a far-right conspiracy theory. Don't believe your lying eyes, is what they tell us. You know what I find even more disturbing, though? Yes, the fact that migrants are flooding and a certain small minority, a very small minority, has such influence and has so much resources in order to get these fucking migrants across the Mediterranean. What disturbs me the most is that bitch that you seen in that video, that Norwegian woman. She's a fucking traitor! It's what she is. And there are so many of our own kind who are like this. They disgust me. To be honest, you know, I've said it 1,000 fucking times. I ain't a white supremacist because there's many of my own that I despise above anything. Because they enable it. They let it happen. It's a tragedy. Because this is our homeland. Sure, I live in America. I've never even been outside of the southern United States. I've never traveled. The only place I'd be willing to travel to overseas would, of course, the places that I mentioned earlier. To be honest, I don't even fucking identify as an American. You know, nationalities nowadays are so watered down and convoluted, it's a pointless label. I look at where I came from. Sure, I was born here. Sure, my recent ancestors were all born here. But this isn't where we are from. I identify more as Danish and English. Much more. Because I know that's where our roots are. I mean, look at these people. Just look! Do they look European? They certainly don't. I don't know if I'd even call them people. Look at what they're doing. Look at how they behave, how they conduct themselves. This is what your leaders are importing to your countries. It's a tragedy. It's horrible. Something has to be done. Your daughters can't even walk around at nighttime. And your sons, if they defend your daughters from these invaders, they get killed. And the media refuses to report on it. I think of Tommy Lind, the young Swedish man who attempted to fight off some of these migrants who were about to rape a Swedish girl. He was killed for it. Now I know some asshole watching this would be like, Dave, you're an Amerimut. What do you care? You're not in Europe. Shut up, Goy. This isn't personal. But it is! It is personal. My heart breaks for these people, for my kin in Europe. This is where they're from. This is their homeland. Our governments. I recently seen, a while back, this was in Canada, an article saying where the government there is importing refugees and they're trying to repatriate them to rural parts of Canada. Because they know, after all, this is where the majority of intelligent white people live. It's the same in Europe. It's the same here in the United States. I'm sure it's the same in South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. This is their plan. But don't believe your lying eyes, is what they tell us. They tell us that this is good for us, that we need cultural enrichment. Because after all, white people don't have a culture. I hate these people. I truly do. I hate them. You know, mainstream retards watching this, they would call me a far-right extremist. If I ever got big enough for it to be possible, I'd be put on a list of some form. Whatever. You see, is it that extreme to wish for your people to have a homeland? Is it that extreme that you worry about your kin? That you want them to be safe? You want them to be reasonably happy? You want them to be content? You want them to be healthy? Is that extreme? Is it? I don't see it that way. But I'm an extremist. Like Mr. Cohen said earlier at the end of that video, talking about no Norwegian wants to be called racist. I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen. I know I'm not Norwegian, but I'm far beyond caring about being called racist. I'm far beyond caring about being called anti-Semitic. It doesn't offend me. In fact, I laugh. I don't care. I don't. Not in the least. Never have and never will. I'm tired of hearing our leaders say, we need immigrants. America is a nation of immigrants. Perhaps. You know, as I said earlier, we were kind of screwed from the get-go. But was Europe? No. They were highly homogeneous countries, societies. And now there has been irreparable damage done to them. It's terrible. I ache for my kin over there. So if you still think, after seeing this, that we need immigrants for the economy, something as superficial, something as honestly unimportant as the economy, if you think your grandchildren's replacement, that your grandchildren have a very good possibility of not even resembling you, your priorities are horribly misaligned. We don't need any more immigrants. We need our own to have children. I'm tired of it. We don't want any more, and we don't need them.